As educators, so many of us start with units of inquiry, but these are a good place to start. But as Kath pointed out, it's not enough. It's not sufficient. There's more to inquiry than just using it as a strategy for a unit of inquiry. Hello and welcome to Blooming Curious, the podcast that's all about nurturing that natural curiosity in our early years kids and students. I'm Edwina, your host and a passionate advocate for play and inquiry, and on a mission to keep children curious and asking questions. The days of talk and chalk are over. We're diving into a world of integrated inquiry and nature-based learning and exploring strategies that create lifelong learners. So if you're a classroom or homeschool educator or even a curious parent, then this is the place for you. Welcome to another episode of Blooming Curious. So last week I attended this free online Inquiry Educator Summit hosted by Toddle. And last week I shared my takeaways from the session with Trevor McKenzie, all about how we plan for curiosity. And if you haven't listened to episode 44, go and do that after this one. But in Kath Murdoch's session, which was titled, Don't Call It Inquiry Unless You Really Mean It, or as she expanded later, Unless You Really Understand It, she went to the heart of our values as inquiry educators, of really being true to authentic inquiry and asking ourselves whether inquiry is in our hearts. Because of course, if you're not someone who's curious and asks questions, how are you going to teach children to be curious and ask questions? As inquiry educators, Kath warned us against the blind spots of inquiry. We need to remain curious and open, not only about ourselves, but about our learners too. We need to view our teaching with a critical eye and check our sources, be informed and question everything. We also need to be willing to try new things, to take risks and change our perspective, not to get stuck. And as educators, so many of us start with units of inquiry, but these are a good place to start. But as Kath pointed out, it's not enough. It's not sufficient. There's more to inquiry than just using it as a strategy for a unit of inquiry. Inquiry is in our everyday experiences too, in those spontaneous teachable moments that the world naturally presents us with, whether it be a storm or a news article or a bird that flies into our classroom. As educators, we need to respond with open minds to the provocations that the world naturally throws at us. Kath Murdoch also reminded us that inquiry is not a separate subject. It's just a stance, a lens through which we teach. And as I've said so many times before, it dovetails with direct and explicit instruction. It's not an either-or situation. As educators, we choose the most appropriate strategy to meet an instructional requirement. It's not all about inquiry, as so many educators incorrectly think. In fact, if you listen to episode 43, I debunked some of the common misconceptions from educators about inquiry. Kath spoke passionately about these being the qualities of inquiry educators. But I think these should be the traits of all educators. Surely our job as educators is to be curious, to be open, to be questioning and willing to change and try new things. If not, how can we be truly giving children rich learning experiences? In her workshop, Kath also spoke about the language of the inquiry educator. Basically, it's the language we use with children that illustrates whether or not we're inquiry educators. She urged us to move away from the I, more towards the you and the we. So instead of saying, I would like, perhaps you can rephrase that to more of, how could you? Or instead of, these are my success criteria, how about, these are your or even our success criteria? The other thing she highlighted was that we need to bring our learners to the center of our activities. We need to ask ourselves, how can we get our learners to connect with this activity that we're doing? How can we actively involve our learners? And this reminded me of episode 39, where I unpacked some important considerations as educators when we're setting up and planning for lessons. And lastly, the phrase that Kath used that really stayed with me was this: don't be seduced into the shallow waters. And that got me thinking, as it should you. How often do we as educators plan lessons that are easy for us, quick for us, easy to clean up for us? Lessons that are minimal work for us. That busy work that is actually quite meaningless. That worksheet that doesn't teach kids anything except how to fill out a worksheet. That video that you put on that actually has no educational value at all. I wrote about that and linked some research evidence into how little video benefits the developing brains in a blog post entitled Lesson Planning with Picture Books. And I'll put a link in the show notes for you so you can have a read of it. Teaching is damn hard. And like all things that are worth doing, I believe it's worth doing well. Our children deserve that. And that brings me to this. I saw a meme on social media the other day that showed these two guys who were having this little dance-off, and that it said this is how teachers feel after PD, knowing it was good, but they're never going to implement it. And I know that's how it is with inquiry. You might just have had that PD and you're excited about it, but you actually don't know where to start. Or you're keen to start, but you just need a little bit of help and direction. Well, that's where my free little e-guide comes in. I created this free e-guide to help you get started, just to dip your toe in and have a go. I laid it out in easy-to-follow steps with examples so that it's easy for you to just pick one area and get started. I've given you all the tips that I successfully used in my very own classroom with my very own students. So just click on the link that I'll leave in the show notes and get that free e-guide and just have a go. I'd love you to send me an email and let me know how you get on. I hope you enjoyed this really short episode today and that Kath Murdoch's wise words have really got you thinking. If you did, please share this episode with a friend or two, and don't forget to follow or subscribe so you get reminded each week when a new episode is published. With that, I'll love and leave you. And remember, curiosity isn't just a trait, it's a superpower. So stay blooming curious until next time.